Hey guys, this is Mike, and on today's podcast we have Jasmin Hume, the CEO of Shiru. I've known Jasmin for some time, and she's really one of the people who helped me decide to put on my own event about food and AI. So that should be a great person to catch up with and talk about what's really happening with AI and how it's changing food. And so we talk about just that. We talk about how VCs and entrepreneurs talk differently about AI in the food system. And we talk about who will own the foundation models for food in the future, and I asked Jasmin to give advice to young food scientists and how they should think about their careers in an era where AI is changing everything. So it's a fun conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. If you haven't already, subscribe to this show. We got lots of great episodes coming up in the near future. All right, let's get to my conversation with Jasmin Hume. All right, I'm excited to be here with Jasmin Hume. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks so much for the opportunity. My name is Jasmin. I'm the founder and CEO of Shiru. Shiru is an AI-first ingredients company, kind of a first of its kind. We're not exactly a traditional ingredients company, but we use artificial intelligence to discover and develop new ingredient products. Really happy to be here.
We've been talking for a while about this intersection of AI and food input creation, food building block creation. When I think about going back with Shiru's history, you guys have evolved. I think, you weren't so AI forward when you first started. Talk about that original Genesis concept, how you pitched it to your investors, and how you've evolved a little bit.
Yeah, happy to. I kind of talk about Shiru in two eras these days. There's like an era one and an era now. So era one, we were really focused specifically on texturizing ingredients within the food space. In fact, we've always been an AI company, but maybe the way we've talked about it has changed. But the core technology has kind of always been there since the beginning, since the early days. So basically we see a need for clean label ingredients, for ingredients that like meet all of the demands of, product formulation, consumer acceptance, nutritious, high performing clean label products. And there's a big gap in the market currently for formulators to be able to access a wide variety of natural solutions that can actually be used to reformulate, improve formulations, take away maybe ingredients that are legacy ingredients that are synthetic additives and remove those from formulations. And so in era one, we really focused on developing a portfolio of texturizing ingredients that are natural proteins that can do amazing things like create thermoset gels, so like really changing texture within food products, or a clean label emulsification, for example. So being able to stabilize oil and water and oil emulsions, which are key to so many different food products. And our part of that vision was also that we were going to produce these ingredients and sell them to CPG companies ourselves. Lots of things that informed kind of our big transition from era one to era two, but suffice it to say that now we are really focused in on what we're very uniquely built to do, which is in fact closer to that discovery piece. Which is, entirely enabled by our large digital library of proteins, which is about 77 million natural proteins at this stage, and specific machine learning algorithms that we've built. Kind of moved away from the vision that we're going to like bring all these ingredients to market and then also have kind of expanded beyond food and kind of changed the bar in terms of the value proposition of the ingredients themselves. So not going after things that maybe have a lot of commodity alternatives that are available on the market.
How much of your evolution was trying to go where the demand was, and maybe also the investable dollars from a venture perspective? Because I mean, as a CEO, as a startup, I think a lot of your job is just constantly thinking about, okay, how's our next round? What's our cap table look like, et cetera. And so I think that, certainly since like the big bang of November 2022, when ChatGPT came out, it's amazing how fast the world of venture and investment in the tech space looked and really started to emphasize AI. How much of that was like opportunistic? And because I know you said the AI was there from the beginning, but you really started to emphasize it when you're outward talking about the company after that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it was all strategic, right? And strategic moves can be informed by, broader changes that are happening across technology platforms or across fundraising landscapes. In our case, it was all of the above. And, I think about it like really what we've recognized at Shiru and what's enabled us to be successful in this transition has been to double down on what is really unique about the company and ruthlessly prioritize that. So anything that some other organization can do better than us, and we can maybe partner or contract with that organization, that's what we've decided to do. So I include in that realm, precision fermentation, scaling ingredients through fermentation, all of that are like those are capabilities that a lot of other companies have. And to be, owning like a huge part of the value chain as a startup is really, really difficult because you're effectively like spreading your resources out. And so what we've been able to do at Shiru is like really concentrate in on this very scalable discovery platform that we have and work with partners who are then able to support on fermentation, strain engineering, basically making the ingredients where what's compounding for Shiru in that equation is our IP, which is the most valuable, most critical part to Shiru. And specifically, it's the IP that we care most about, which is like this new protein does this new thing. And all the other IP were like okay on sharing and working with others, but like really doubling down on what makes us unique has enabled us to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I know we chatted a bit briefly last week because we did a webinar for the Japan audience about what's happening with AI in food. And what was interesting in our pre-chat is you talked about how, as the word gets out with, Shiru and what you guys are doing with your AI for proteins, for example, you're having big food companies approach you with different things, with unique problem sets that they want to solve that weren't necessarily things you've solved before that, or like you've really marketed and kind of pushed your name out there for. So talk about that. Is kind of what you're having people come to you and approaching you for changing and evolving? And is that as a result changing and evolving what the company is?
Yeah. So, there is a real tension when you're building a company that's both a platform and products. Everyone has their opinions on this, and I've heard them all. Some people believe that, companies should only be scaling products and never invest a dollar in platform, and others think the opposite, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think early on, we saw that a technology like the one that we've built could uncover huge amounts of valuable new products. Now, we started in a very kind of narrow product realm of like texturizing ingredients for food, and that has become more broad and I think more valuable from Shiru's perspective in terms of these other applications that we're now going into. And it really is both. Like in the early days, we built this thing, we knew what it could do. We marketed that, had lots of conversations and, agreements, pilot studies with big food companies, big ingredients companies. I think the more that we have presented the company as like we can discover things that no one else can and faster than anyone else can, a lot of these businesses have approached us and said, well, if you guys can do that, like that specific thing, find a clean label emulsifier, for example, then can you do this other thing? And it might be solving a very specific formulation challenge that that company has that like we might have not thought about or come across before. And so it's really great to be able to have those conversations. There's all kinds of alignment that has to happen then. It's like, one, is it technically feasible for us? Like, is it within the realm of we feel like we could execute on it? And then what is the engagement model for us to be able to support that partner or that company in that search? But yeah, we've been really successful in launching some projects recently that were very much a market or customer pull and not necessarily things that we started the company to do a couple of years ago.
I talked with a venture capitalist last week about the space, and the tone from them was a lot more skeptical about the embrace of AI within the broader food system. And I think VCs kind of have to be skeptical because they're investing their dollars and and they're getting approached with so many pitches. The tone was, hey, we talked to a lot of big food companies and they're very unwilling to maybe give up the core functions of a lot of the longtime employees. They're not necessarily really using AI for all that much. And so I don't know. It just seemed like that sometimes what I hear from like for venture capitalists is much different than obviously folks with a vested interest in pushing their platforms. I'm not saying that like you are not seeing a lot of enthusiasm, but it just, how do you kind of rectify kind of the skepticism I'm hearing from some camps?
Look, the skepticism is real. um,
Okay.
we are we're a new ingredients company, and I like put it in quotes like that because there's no model for what we are building. There is no playbook for this. I think the food industry is very familiar with the normal ways of working with ingredients companies, and frankly, all of those companies are like more than a century old, right? Like we're working against very established ways of working as an industry and innovating. Um, and so it's not typical that in the food space, if a CPG needs a new ingredient that, meets certain criteria, that they have any real way to be like, okay, and we need it to do X, Y, and Z, and we need it in 6 months. That has not existed before now. And so I think the skepticism is real. The other thing I'll call out is that the companies that we work with have extraordinarily sophisticated R&D capabilities, world-class research and science that goes on at these companies. And it has been that way for decades, right? And so we come along and we're like, hey, we have a different way of approaching this, a different toolbox that maybe wasn't, the tools that we use, machine learning, structural biology, weren't, born to solve these challenges. And so naturally, I think as any good scientist, people want to see it proven before it's adopted. So we get a healthy amount of skepticism. The first calls that we have with any of these R&D teams, it's a lot of tire kicking. It's a lot of like making sure that we know our stuff, that like if they were to do it, would they do it the same way? But once we get the buy-in, which we do, then it becomes really exciting. And then it's like, wow, what can we do working together? And that's where we're very eager to get to those conversations. But yeah, naturally, these are companies that are super well resourced and have extraordinary science going on, within their four walls. And so it's coming at it from curiosity, but also like, how can we make the most out of this?
One of the things I've been wrestling with and having some conversations about is how ultimately this space evolves. One of
Yeah.
the things I hear, for example, from out of Notco is, hey, we're the foundation model for food, right? And then I've been talking to a lot of my more just AI tech centric friends. And if you talk about people who think a lot about just AI, it's like the belief is like that all the foundation models will be owned by the big platforms because you just can't match the investment that they're putting in, maybe eventually trillions of dollars and all those GPUs you have to have. Microsoft, OpenAI, et cetera. Where do you see this going in terms of like who owns the ultimate platform? Will there be specialist companies that own foundation models tailored towards individual or specific verticals like food? Or is this something that, it's such an interesting evolution path, and trying to kind of figure out where all it goes is interesting.
Yeah, if I kind of just like take off my Shiru hat for a second and
Yeah.
like think about this space more broadly, first of all, everything is moving so extraordinarily fast, right? Like I can't open up like the news or my email or LinkedIn or anything, on a weekly basis without hearing, okay, this major milestone has been reached using artificial intelligence. And that's not only true like generally, that's also true as it touches, protein discovery, as it touches ingredients, all of it is happening at the same time. I do see like I ultimately it all comes down to the data, Mike, and that's where it's really tricky because these companies, these legacy food and ingredients businesses have centuries worth of data to be determined how well, analyze or how well cataloged and usable that is for things like machine learning, right? That's a whole activity in massive undertaking in and of itself. But they're not going to very quickly turn over that data to a foundational model like ChatGPT, or even like an upstart company that is working to build predictions off of it. I think it is, they see the need for it, but it's very much like, are we going to build this in-house? Because we understand our data, we understand the questions that we need to ask of the data, and they are very specific and they do relate to in-lab validation. That's the other part of it. Like, it's not just processing something in a software. You then have to bring it into the lab and make sure that it actually works. Otherwise, the predictions are frankly worthless, right? So it could be that in 5-10 years there are some of these big platforms, whether they're coming out of Meta or Google or Amazon, like that they are addressing broader spectrum, more scientifically founded things like protein discovery, ingredient discovery, product formulation. They're not there today, and there's a ton of very specific know-how that goes into optimizing and making those models usable for all those various different applications. So possibly, big partnerships that you could see between like a Microsoft and, CPGX, but we haven't seen any today. And we're watching this space very carefully, but I think there's still a gap missing of like the validation of those models in the real world applications, with which in food is very complex.
Yeah, you see a lot of big established players who oftentimes help kind of on the tip of the spear innovation engine, trying to figure out where to go. Like, Matson, I know that they were talking about building their little, they're doing like almost an Alexa for food, which was kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
there's a name that they gave it, and I don't remember what it
Yeah, yeah, I forgot what it
Yes,
was.
I've seen a
And
demo.
there's others doing interesting things, but it definitely seems like there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to kind of be thought leaders in the space in the era of AI. So the build versus buy decision,
Mhm.
you kind of alluded to the fact that the big CPGs have all this centuries of data they don't want to give up. Are you talking about a lot of them about building kind of internally with them, where they would have kind of like their own instances of an
We're
innovation
starting.
engine?
Yeah, we're starting to now. I mean, and again, like things change so quickly. Like I think in many ways, Shiru was like ahead of its time to build something like this for an industry that, 6 years ago, no one was talking about this. And now it feels like everyone is talking about it, which is great for us to be kind of in that part of the wave, if you will. But yes, I mean, I think people are starting to think about that now. And looking at the kind of standard models that are available and accessible that people are using for analyzing data, for text, for all kinds of things, they're not specific to food, certainly not specific to, my world of like protein chemistry, structural biology, protein function. Yet it's not as plug and play as some of these open source models are, certainly, but the need is definitely there. And so how do you bridge that gap? There could be a wave of acquisitions of companies that happen over the next couple of years, right? Because the data that ingredient company A is working to optimize might be different than the data that ingredient company B is, but maybe they internally are in an arms race to figure out how are we going to future proof our pipelines to address consumer needs, to keep costs, reasonable. I think AI can help with a lot of that. And also, they are probably not like, I don't know how much sense it makes for them to like hire whole teams of like machine learning researchers, right? So all of this is like in
Yeah,
progress, lots of
yeah.
discussions happening, I think, across boardrooms across this industry.
And what's interesting is, I think if you're an outsider looking in, or even if you're at a food company and think about AI, I think what they don't realize is there's AI solutions that are addressing every part of the food building block or food building process. And so we had a call or a webinar last week where we had someone from Keychain, which is a much different company than Shiru. And I've talked to folks from Starday, which is a much different company from Shiru. So like it might be how do you optimize around manufacturing versus like kind of building block discovery, or how do we kind of make sure this is something that consumers like? So we're going to use synthetic data and create digital twins. So there's all these different things and kind of things that you do as a food company that you could start to apply AI to. And
Definitely.
you're doing kind of a part of it, but there's a lot more
Definitely.
around.
It's so exciting. Like, I find that really thrilling to see because I don't think there's going to be an AI solution to like win them all. Like, not in food and ingredients. There's so many discrete activities. These companies, like the legacy companies, are massive. They're tens of thousands of employees. You have sourcing and procurement, and that's very different than at the bench R&D. But like AI can almost certainly improve workflows and processes and create efficiencies across all of those areas. Even within Shiru, there are use cases for AI that are like not exactly our core use of AI, which is a core part of our technology. For example, regulatory. So, can we use AI to better screen, like in silico, identify and prioritize which natural proteins are going to have a clearer path through the regulatory process? Almost certainly. Now, that's building a whole other functionality within our business, but like that's just an example of like how these other areas can be optimized as well. The other one, we file a lot of IP, a lot of patents. And so we're looking at how to automate freedom to operate searches, so FTO searches, because we do protein discovery. And so we want to make sure that we are the ones who've discovered it, that it hasn't been documented before. But like, these are just examples. Like, AI can be used for all of those things. And so I imagine within a large ingredients business, the opportunities for creating efficiencies with digital tools are tremendous.
I saw that IFT also created their own AI. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but it's interesting to see like trade organizations or associations are saying, hey, how do we be and stay relevant in the era of AI? And so if you're like a very heavy scientific focused trade association that, for example, caters to food scientists, do you start to create your own AI that they can leverage? And I think they're thinking along those lines.
Yeah, that's neat. I like to see that. And that's probably have a very, informed perspective across the industry, which might create even more value. I get really curious because this is like front of mind running Shiru. Like, I get really curious about the business models that can facilitate all of these things, because first, we talked about data and how critical that is. Like, where is the training data coming from? Who owns that training data, and therefore who owns the results of the output of these systems? It's a really important, non-trivial question, because without answering that question, people might just like hold their data close. And even if you build a tool that could be useful, without understanding how it's going to be used, who's going to have access to it, the company's not going to want to put in their data to then know that that tool can use their data to inform their competitor. It's not going to happen. And so I think there are some really important questions that I get really curious about how all of that is going to be addressed. Not to mention just like, business model, how it's going to be funded, who's building it, all of that stuff. Like, that's really front of mind for Shiru. We think about that a lot.
So you guys also announced a marketplace almost, I think at the time, maybe a year and a half ago, you called it an Amazon for proteins. Talk a little bit about how that's going. Are you guys still focused on building that out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's active, it's up and running. You can access it at proteindiscovery.ai, and it's open to everybody. So what we have on there, we basically built kind of a demo. It's like a slice of our technology platform that is on the website there. And so initially we built it really as a tool to better explain how we do protein discovery. It's a kind of an esoteric concept for folks that are not in this all the time. But yes, effectively, like, you can go in and you can search for things and you can say, okay, I need an ingredient that's going to be a clean label gelling agent, binding agent, right? And so we have on that website, certain select ingredients that we've classified with the data there, and also like what source they come from. Are they from plants? Are they from fungi, et cetera, et cetera? So people can really get a visual sense of how this all works. Now, internally, like when we actually launch, when we have partnerships with our customers, whether they be ingredients companies or CPG companies, folks are like, okay, so do I get like a login to your platform? We're not quite there yet. We're building that out, but we're not quite there. We say right now that the user interface is our team. So what we have online is a demo, but certainly all of the back end of how, the machinery works, it's up and running. But right now we have the interface being our team still today.
So what do you think Shiru is going to be in 5 years or 10 years? I mean, is that an impossible question? I mean, it certainly looks like you guys have changed so much in just the past 5 years. I can't imagine what you might be in another 5 or 10.
Yeah. So we have it's a crazy journey to be an entrepreneur, and like thinking back, like when I started this, like what was in my head and what the vision was and like how that's been realized. There are some massive milestones that we've achieved in 2025 that hopefully we'll be announcing publicly in the next couple months, that are like clear goalposts across this journey of building a scalable kind of IP discovery company. And so our model, really, like the most scalable part of the model, is like we discover things, we file IP on them, and then we license or sell that IP to food companies and to ingredients companies. We've dipped our toe in manufacturing. We're still manufacturing some of our ingredients. It is really hard. It's a very different business than, a CapEx light digital discovery company. And also something that we are not uniquely the best in the world at in terms of manufacturing. We are uniquely the best in the world at natural protein discovery. So I think it's going to be kind of continuing to build value there. Our IP portfolio, in terms of like the number of proteins that we've discovered, has doubled year over year since 2022. So we have an exponentially growing IP portfolio, which is wild. And now the focus is on like, how do we monetize that? So, these are high margin opportunities in licensing and IP sales that we're going to continue to prioritize. And we're on a really good, exciting trajectory there. So I think over the next couple of years, we're going to be like a really exciting, very profitable company that's, running a lean operation, generating a lot of value.
What advice would you give to a food company that is really kind of still trying to figure it out? The boardroom's asking, "Hey, what is this? What do we do with AI?" Uh, in terms of bringing in those competencies, building that muscle, because I feel like a lot of companies are still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, it's a little hard for me to imagine like how the complexity of the stakeholders and like big companies, right? But I think the simplest advice or perspective that I can give is just get your feet wet. Like start somewhere, start small, and build the confidence. A show and tell goes a long way. And you don't necessarily, obviously, there are some tools that you can have like enterprise access to. So you're like protecting the data that you're putting in. I think that's critically important. But having some initial wins on what these tools can do to improve efficiencies and being able to show those things and talk about them and let people kind of connect the dots of like how further you can take that to increase the impact, I think could go a long way. And this is happening obviously in big ways and small ways in kind of all businesses today. And we've done this ourselves across, all kinds of different functions within the company. But that's kind of the best advice. Also, like don't, perfect is the enemy of good. Just don't wait for you to like for the perfect time, the perfect problem to solve, the perfect data set, because time is going to pass you by. And these are times to be experimental, I think.
And what about not necessarily at the company level, but at the individual level, right? One of the challenges I have when people ask me for advice is there's so much unknown about the future, and desk jobs, knowledge-based jobs are, I think, going to be threatened by AI to a certain degree, because I just don't think there's going to need to have a need for as many people. Oftentimes tell young people to go into trades. So, because they're just, you're not going to see AI take those over as fast. So what advice as a working food scientist would you give someone who's majoring in that in college with the looking forward towards an era that is going to be increasingly dominated by artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are going to be some redundancies, some jobs that like, maybe an AI system can solve better or faster, right? I think still in the world where we are producing physical goods, things that we eat, things that need to be packaged, stored, etc., shipped, distributed, there's a limitation to how much AI can touch all of that, because as we know, sensory is king, like taste is king. And it's not like at this point, we don't have something that can actually like, do the job fully. Right. But I would say, working in this space in the R&D sector within ingredients and food, these technologies are going to make efficiencies possible. And so, the more value you can add strategically, and with people, I think that's the biggest thing. Like we use AI for a lot at Shiru, but decisions are made by people, and people we're complex beings. It's building those skills where you can really communicate with others, connect with others to solve problems, get in a room, like get a whiteboard out, like those skills to be able to come together, solve problems, to resolve conflicts, to innovate, to create, spaces for intelligent conversation, debate, to improve ideas. That's not going anywhere. And I think it's going to be more and more important for people who are earlier in their careers to practice those skills. We might be able to work remotely. I'm working from home today, but like really get in the office, get in rooms with people. Conflict is okay. You have to learn to navigate those things. Those things are not going to be able to be automated. And the folks who have those skills are going to be very valuable.
And I think there's a balance you have to strike, right? You should be someone who wants to use these modern tools learns to use AI, but at the same time, I think you're going to be more valuable if you build your own knowledge and understand the science and kind of do the work. Because I
So
think it's like the folks that can both embrace the modern tools, but also have that library of knowledge in their own head, I
yes,
think are going to just navigate the world better.
yes, certainly. I mean, it's, you think about just it's part of your toolbox. It's not the only, it shouldn't be the only thing in your toolbox. But just like you might whip out a calculator or a ruler or whatever to solve problems, like it's one of those things. But yeah, I think it's how it works in concert and how individuals know which tools to access that's really going to help people.
All right. So learn your science.
Use it to get you half the way there, but not the full way there.
Yeah.
That's the danger.
Well, Jasmin, I always enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Mike. Good talking to you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. Jasmin Hume, CEO of Shiru, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. If you haven't already written a review of this podcast, please do give us a 5-star review if you feel so inclined. We always appreciate it because it really, really helps. All right, folks, we'll talk to you next week.
If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with a friend? And don't forget to give us a 5-star review. You'll find more content like this on thespoon.tech/podcasts.